I have the absolute pleasure at this time of doing a build with Danny of Danny's Diecast Disasters. I've been a fan of his for quite some time, and I'll go into that in a minute. But what we're doing is this Hot Wheels bone speeder and something to haul it. And so naturally, I'm thrilled to do this build with Danny. Danny, on the odd chance that you're not familiar with Danny, and I can't imagine that anyone who watches my channel isn't already a subscriber of his, but on the odd chance that you're not familiar with his work, one of the things I truly appreciate about it is that he builds everything. It will be a custom one time, and it will be a post-apocalyptic build the next time, and the next time it'll be some odd fight of fancy, and they're all done wonderfully. And that keeps it interesting, you know? And I really appreciate that because I like doing a wide variety of things. It's been a true inspiration for me. So I was trying to figure out what to do with the bone speeder, and it's obviously very similar to a bone shaker. I like those with closed tops, so I got out the JB Weld and decided, okay, I'm going to close the top on this. And I was searching around the internet and found an image of a military vehicle that had been created. It was basically painted in a dark green color, had U.S. markings on it, and I really liked the look of it, so I decided I was going to take that direction, and then I started thinking, okay, well, let's think of this as post-apocalyptic, and let's see where we go. So I had some big fat green light wheels I wanted to put on the back of this. I couldn't find wheels exactly right for the front, so I rummaged through some castings and I found this one. So I stole the wheels off that for the front and had to make some tweaks to the chassis. It's a plastic base on this one. Metal body, plastic base, plastic insert. So I just started clipping some odds and ends off to make the wheels fit. But I started thinking, I want this to be a military vehicle. This is the military, U.S. military that's still around post-apocalypse. And they're looking for survivors and trying to help. And so that's the direction I'm going with this. To give you an idea, I'm thinking of this as an army vehicle. I'm not loading it up with guns or anything like that, because again, they're looking for survivors, is the story behind this one. So surprisingly, I don't know if you can tell just by looking at this, but I ordered a couple of these castings, and the hauler I ended up using, I had a couple of those on hand too. So I get to show you them side by side, basically unchanged version and the changed versions. But after the top here is sealed up with the JB Weld, I end up going over it with Bondo spot putty just to make it a little smoother. And then I end up painting this one, once all is said and done, with Tester's Camo colors, Camo dark green. That's the direction I went with this one, this part of the build. And so it's staying kind of a military-ish vehicle. The center part was chrome, which was totally inappropriate for this build. So I dropped that in super clean to strip the chrome off, which works exceptionally well. The body did need to be cleaned up a little bit. There you see after I had sanded down the Bondo spot putty on the top, and sealing the top with JB Weld works really well. I've done that trick before on bone shakers. I really like the result. It's a very easy way to seal off the roof by putting the tape down and then filling it from the inside. So I just need to clean the body up a little bit on here. The bone speeder casting is a little rough. Doesn't seem to be as rough as some of the bone shaker castings. For those of you who hate the skull on the bone shaker, you'll be happy to know that this does not have one. It has a standard radiator up front. So I did print some very basic decals. It's just a very simple star and a circle. And again, there you see the dark green paint on the body of this. I end up spray painting the base and the once the chrome was stripped off the interior section, I end up spraying those with Rust-Oleum flat black. This is all rattle can work. I haven't progressed to the airbrush yet, but it's sitting there chomping at the bit. That will be happening very soon. It'll be interesting to see how that works out for me. At this point, I start using a combination of Vallejo, Army Painter, and Citadel Paints to add some detail. There is quite a bit of detail on this casting. I was really happy with what they provide already on the casting. There you see some of the detail I'm starting to add on the interior and the casting itself. In addition to doing the paints that I mentioned, I do go over this with some of the Tamiya weathering powders as well. And I also, well, as you can see right here, I break out some of the AK Interactive weathering pencils. These are really interesting. I need to work with them more. I admit, I watch Danny's builds, and he makes it look so easy sometimes. And I know I have a long way to go in weathering skills. But definitely his videos are an inspiration. And I hope someday to get just to a fraction of his level. I'll be thrilled. But I do what I can here. It's a learning experience as you're doing these things. And they're a lot of fun. They're a wonderful escape, and they're a lot of fun. These pencils are interesting, though, because when you wet them a little, they're far more effective wet. And you can also brush after you've used the pencils, before it dries, obviously. But you can then use a brush to spread out the detail, to work it in, all in all, to make it look better. So there you basically see where I ended up on a lot of the parts. I start adding a little more detail to the interior as well. Off camera, I take a toothpick and I paint in straps for the seat belts, and did a little bit more detail as well. I go over it all with a flat clear paint. And so here's where I ended up on the bone speeder casting. It's dark, but it should be. It's one of those things that I didn't want it to look happy. None of this build, these two vehicles should not look happy. But then in an odd, goofy twist, I paint the taillight on here, and I decided that I wanted the top half red, the bottom half to be white like a backup light. I didn't weather those too much because, and this is going to sound goofy, it looks like a Pokemon ball. And I had to laugh when I saw it. And so I left it the way it was, just to be a little different, to be a little odd. And I did go over this with Null Oil after all was said and done to give it a little more. And then it was on to the hauler. I've done a few of these K7s in the past, and I've had a lot of fun. I've made a Bone Shaker version of it. I've made a Ghostbusters version of it. I made a Dragster version of it. And so I thought, I'm going to use that for this one. And oddly enough, this is possibly the least customized version, or the least altered version that I've done of this. And I still make it look quite a bit different than it starts out. There's something about the K7 castings that I love. And like I said, I do have yet another extra one of these sitting around, if not, to be honest, 2 or 3. They're obviously a little larger. They carry things like the Bone Speeder very well in the back. I was surprised. I think I mentioned earlier how the Bone Speeder surprised me when I got the casting, that it's larger than a Bone Shaker. It's surprisingly larger than a Bone Shaker. And I was thinking it'd be a very similar size. So once I got it, once the Bone Speeder casting arrived, I had to double check to make sure it would fit in the back of the K7, or I was going to have to alter my plans. The K7 castings themselves are oddly rough. The ones I've done in the past are rougher than I would have expected. There's a lot of casting lines that need to be cleaned up. And it's not from play use. They truly are a lot of imperfections in the build, in the construction of them, that you just need to clean up. And, that's the way some castings are. They just need more cleaning than others, and so you just work your way through them. This, again, has the advantage of being a post-apocalyptic style build, so they don't have to be perfect. What I end up doing on this is, after I put this coat down, I hit it with Rust-Oleum Satin Nutmeg. That's the base color I put down. And then Danny had done Camo using a tack adhesive. This was in a recent video of his. And I've tried Camo before, and it's always gone horribly wrong. Well, I had this clay laying around. It's obviously not a wet clay. It's an odd, it almost is foam-like. It's hard to describe. But I picked that up off Amazon a while back. Thought, well, that should work. And it worked wonderfully. The method that Danny used, it's weird because it works great. And it's insanely easy to do. The results come very easily. And so I was telling a friend, this works so easily, it makes me want to do Camo on everything, which is probably not a good thing. But now I don't hesitate to do this again. It worked wonderfully well. So I had a similar set of decals as I made for the Bone Speeder. I had extras of that, so I ended up putting those on the K7 here to make it match. And this I also end up weathering with Nuln Oil. I wanted everything to have a grimy look, if that makes sense. They aren't in the desert looking for people. They're in, I'm imagining this. Obviously, this is my fictional world that I'm creating. And I picture them running around urban areas. So they didn't need the camouflage, but that's what they had. And so they're using whatever vehicles they have to go around and look for survivors. I did use gauzy. The glass was in fairly good shape. This one, unfortunately, had amber glass, but I didn't necessarily see that as a problem because I could see that in a military vehicle. I did use 3D printed wheels for this. I replaced the Matchbox wheels that just seemed very inappropriate. This is a racing car transport that Matchbox made, and I'm converting it to a military vehicle. So I used the Vallejo paints to make the wheels match I believe that's an olive green color that I used in this one. And again, there you get a better look at the 3D printed wheels. And those were printed with a black resin, and then I did have to go over it to make the color look a little bit better on the wheels. The interior, the K7 comes with a fantastically detailed interior. There's this tool rack that's in the back. The dash is well detailed. I ended up painting the seats gray. I left the interior black, but I wanted the seats to stand out a little bit. So I paint those gray, again with some of the Vallejo paints. Detailing or picking out the detail with the Sharpie pen is very easy to do. It's nice that that detail is raised enough that you can get away with that. I did go over that interior with Nuln Oil. Here I've mounted the wheels on the base. I kept the original Matchbox system for retaining the axles. Those are knobby tires on there. The base was painted with flat Rust-Oleum black. And here you can see after the gray dried, I ended up, like I said, going over that with Nuln Oil. Again, it gives a little more depth and body to this. It just makes it look more realistic. The Nuln Oil, I went over everything with it, but when it came to the interior base, where the section where the bone speeder would typically ride in the back of this vehicle, that section I coated the heck out of with Nuln Oil. I wanted it to look horribly grimy. I wanted it to look like it had a lot of oil buildup just from what's dripping off the bottom of the bone speeder, in effect. And so you see, I hit this pretty good with the Nuln Oil. And I'm really happy with the horrible result, the filthy result that comes from this. It just seemed right. It seemed like it would be the dirtiest, nastiest section of this entire vehicle. Because it's catching what's under the bone speeder when it comes in from a run. Again, that Citadel Nuln Oil that I used on here. I glued in the horns. I ended up painting those with the olive green as well. I think this might be the first K7 that I've kept the stock horns on. I've taken them off. I've replaced them with other things, as I recall. Like on the Ghostbusters, a light bar ends up going up there. And I coated the inside back with the Nuln Oil. I end up coating the entire vehicle with Nuln Oil because it just looked too fresh. And I couldn't have that. I'd like to take a moment to thank Danny so very much for allowing me to do this build with him. It has been an absolute pleasure and honor. I mentioned to my Gaslands expert, Mike Hawkins, I mentioned to him, I think it was last night in a message on Facebook, that I was doing a build with Danny, and he said, tell him he's my idol. And I had to laugh because, Danny is an idol to a lot of us. His builds are truly inspirational. And so here we have putting the K7 back together, all the pieces. But again, thank you, Danny, for this. This has been an absolute pleasure and honor. And I hope that you enjoy what I ended up with here. I know I've seen the picture you sent of what you were doing, and I'm glad we went like very opposite directions. So, fortunately, I'd hate to have this one sitting next to yours, and it would just pale in comparison is the thing. So I'm glad we went opposite directions. So there you have the K7. You see how dirty and grimy that is where the bone speeder would sit. So there you have the two side by side. And we'll go through here. I'm going to show the bone speeder again. And there's several glamour shots coming up of not only the bone speeder itself that you see there. There you see the Pokemon ball in the back. Yeah, it may be a little goofy, but you could say that about a lot of my builds. I'd like to thank you all for watching this video. I hope you like what I came up with here. It's different. Thank you all for watching these videos. Thank you all for all of your support through these builds. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And don't forget we have a build coming up February 6th. If you like this kind of build, the Three Blind Mice have their Gaslands build coming up. And for that one, that's a 62 VW. So I'd also like to take a moment to thank my patrons for all of their support on Patreon. And thank you all for watching. Catch you in the next one.